Hello, my friend. On today's episode, I am back with Ben Pickard, and we're exploring how to lead more like a coach. We unpack what it means to lead with curiosity instead of control, and how to ask great questions, listen deeply, and empowering your team to think for themselves, and how that can transform your leadership style and your team's results. So if you're ready to kind of ditch the pressure to have all the answers and instead build a more collaborative, empowering culture at your gym, this is an episode you don't want to miss. So grab a pen, get curious, and let's dive in. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Before I jump into today's episode, I want to let you know that we have a free tool available on our website, and you can get to it in the show notes down below. There's a link there. It's free. It's called our Ultimate Gym Owner Report Card. And if you listened to this podcast before, you've heard me talk about it because often as gym owners, you just don't know what to focus your energy and effort on. So we made this little report card for you that you can do in under 10 minutes. It helps you assess all the areas of the business where you feel like you're really crushing it and what areas of the business where you feel like you haven't really developed systems to consistently and effectively produce results. So if you want to get a little unstuck from time to time and start getting some more effective progress and flow in your work, click the show notes down below and download our Ultimate Gym Owner Report Card. Start using it right away, and I promise it'll help you get unstuck and continue building momentum in the growth and development of your business. That being said, Ben's on the podcast today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Yeah, I know you were doing some renovations at your house. How's that going?
It is real good. We are just missing a little bit of countertop, but I will say having a unnecessarily large shower and heated floors in our bathroom is luxury I didn't know I needed.
Whoa.
I know.
You are living large, my friend. Heated floors, giant shower. What else is missing in life?
Happy wife.
That's
happy
it.
life,
You got it
right?
all. But good for you. That's amazing. We've both been in the midst of some renovations recently, so I'm glad yours are wrapping up in a more timely fashion than mine are.
Yeah, is your condo almost done?
Yeah, we're working on it. I think, there's some furniture and some things getting installed next week. So there's some finishes coming around the pike. Hopefully we'll be in there in the next month or two. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into today's episode. So today, what we wanted to talk about is actually talking about the skill of coaching and how the skill of coaching can help us become better leaders. So maybe let's just do a little bit of defining terms first, right? So when we talk about coaching in today's podcast, we're not just talking about like trainer coaching, like you being in front of a trainer and helping them do their workout, right? We often call those people coaches as well because there's a kind of coaching relationship there. But we're talking about coaching in this episode today, we're talking about kind of like a capital C coaching, about the relationship of coaching, which means I'll give my own kind of version of how I think about coaching. But coaching is making yourself available to someone else to support their growth and development. It means putting aside your needs, your egos, your opinions, and being available to them first, right? It's kind of a servant leadership kind of posture in many ways. And so I think the skill we're talking about here is being able to be really curious, ask good questions, help people reflect on their own thinking and ideas, to go to a conversation with more curiosity than opinions, and that way of thinking and being, that kind of coaching skill set can be so valuable as a leader. So I think we'll define it more as we continue in the podcast, but Ben, let's just have you kick it off. When you think about how you've used your coaching and communication skills effective as a leader, what are some things that pop up for you?
Yeah, the word that comes to mind is empowerment. Like if I'm working with somebody and they bring something to the table and I get curious around it and help them get to a potential solution for it, it's empowering them to make decisions. It's empowering them to like kind of take the lead on thing. I think it's supporting their initiative. But it's also not, it's like the opposite of coming in with, let me just solve all these problems for you, which I think I used to think was good leadership. I'm like helping get obstacles out of their way so that they can have a neat, and it comes from I'm going to try to say a healthy emotional place to want to do that, but it's not actually helpful in the grand scheme of things. In fact, when I do a quarterly review with Leisha, one of the consistent things she gives me feedback on is like a stop doing is to stop solving the problems for her. I'm like, okay, I'll do my best to not help less. Like, it's a weird thing. But I think about really like putting your
Hmm.
people first so that they have the tools and permission to handle those things.
Yep. Yeah. I think you well said. I think that's a good contrast for us to draw right off the bat here, right? So, one example of a leadership kind of conversation. This is the style of leadership many of us were taught and were modeled for us in some of our early leaders and maybe even our parents, is that leaders are people who have all the answers. That you don't know as much, you don't have the power or the authority, so you go to them. They will solve it for you. They will tell you what to do. They will, tell you what to do, what not to do. That then that's a version of leadership that we all know well. And I think, listen, there's some truth to the fact that leaders, by definition, sometimes have more power and authority, and they might have more information at their fingertips. So sometimes leaders do need to share the information that they have and be the final decision maker. That's not wrong, but it's not the only way to do things. I think you modeled out there a perfect example of like when you don't lead from that place and you lead from the place of helping them figure out how to solve their own problems, sharing power and authority with them so they are more of the decision makers of things that impact their jobs, right? There's a whole different way of leading that can be super valuable. So say more about what the outcomes of those of that approach has been for you, right? So you mentioned that people are a little more empowered. What else?
It's a healthier relationship is kind of the biggest one that comes
Mm,
to mind. I
yeah.
will say, because I imagine people are thinking it, it's like, well, if I let my team do the thing when I have all the answers, or I
Yes.
believe I have all the answers, they're going to make more mistakes. And in my experience, it is true that more mistakes are made, but it's like 5% more mistakes. And the trade off,
Mm,
like it's worth it. And let's be real. I mean, I talked to you about this years ago, but I don't think I've said it on the podcast. I realized when I was running my gym that I believed that I was a 10, like a 10 at running a gym.
yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at running your gym? I just assumed I was the best because I was in the owner's seat. And when I brought on Leisha, I started to ask the question of like, well, what if I'm a 7? What does a 10 look like? And yes, Leisha will, and everyone, myself included, like, quick aside here, just because I'm the owner and I think of all the answers doesn't mean I don't fuck shit up. I just clean up my own messes. So even though they might
Yep.
like try a thing and it didn't work, but they've got that sense of like, oh, all right, I'm going to get it better next time, or I've learned a valuable thing that I can then apply to this. Them making one or two small mistakes is absolutely worth the trade-off of now they know how to solve that problem moving forward indefinitely, and they feel the
Yeah.
support and freedom to be able to address it rather than I don't think I should do anything because Michael's going to be mad at me if I do the wrong thing here. I
Yep.
think I can speak for you and say you'd rather me try and screw it up than not try at all and leave it behind.
Yes. 100%. I think that's it. I think a lot of what drives leaders to maintain that kind of what I'll call this kind of old school way of leading is they're afraid of like anyone messing up anything, right? Because maybe they have experience in their past of being in trouble when they've messed up. But the reality is, mistakes are necessary for invention. Mistakes are necessary for creativity. Mistakes are necessary when building systems and businesses, when working with humans. Mistakes are necessary, and they're also the most necessary part of learning, right? So if you're a leader that's trying to protect your team from ever making mistakes, you're really also protecting them from learning. Right. Right. And so, we know a lot of what we've known because of our experience, because we've made a lot of mistakes. And we don't want everyone on our team to remake every mistake we've made. That's not the point. Right.
Right.
But to some degree, they have to learn their own lessons. Right. They'll learn some from you, right? And just they'll do it your way because you already fucked it up a bunch and you're going to tell them to avoid that mistake. But if
Yeah.
that's the only way you lead, right? It's just do it my way because I know better. You're missing out on all kinds of learning from people, in your organization. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah,
demystification of mistakes aren't bad. Like they will make a few more mistakes.
yeah.
That's if you are listening to this podcast and your business still exists and you're anything like me and have made hundreds, if not thousands of mistakes and your business is still standing, you can afford someone on your
Yeah.
team making a couple. Like you're gonna be fine.
100%. Yeah, I'll say this. I think, when I think about people transitioning from a more kind of like command and control style of leadership, from more like do what I say style of leadership to a more coaching style of leadership, I think there's like a few trade-offs, like a few mindset trade-offs we need them to make. And I'll just go through these and I want to hear your experience because I think you've
Please.
done all of these things, right? So
I want to know
one
what you have
is
to say.
instead of
I'm
thinking,
genuinely curious.
Yeah. I think the three kind of mindset shifts I think people need to make when they want to lead more from a place of coaching is one is to swap out the idea of me being an expert to me being a guide. Right.
Mm.
Because when I think of myself as a leader who's also an expert, I do think I know it all. I'm an expert in this. I know everything there is to know about my business. In some ways, right? All of you listening who own gyms, you're in some ways an expert of your business. And sometimes you have to pull out that expertise and really lead from a place of like authority. But if that's the only way you do it, it's limiting, right? So you want to think about, okay, how can I be more of a guide? How can I be, more of a Sherpa? Even though I think there's some places where I'm not supposed to use that word anymore, but you know what I'm saying, right? Someone whose job it is to not need to be the smartest person in the room, but to trust that other people at moments could also be the smartest person in the room, and you can both be a teacher and a student, and in both places you're still could be a good leader, right? Like, so I think that switch from expert to guide is a meaningful mindset shift. The other one, which I think you talked about a little bit already, is switch from this place of judging to curiosity. So from judgment to curiosity, this place of like, part of my job is to tell people what they're doing wrong. Part of my job is to like always be giving feedback, right? And like, yeah, you do have to catch the mistakes and you do have to catch the good things, but can you do that from a place of curiosity, right? So instead of approaching things like, why did I do it like that, with like this kind of anger and judgment, to approach things like, well, I wonder, what are some reasons they decided to do it that way, right? Is it kind of a different energy, right? It's a different mindset shift to how you think about leading. And I'll circle back to each of these, but I just want to get them out on the table.
Hey there, Business Unicorns podcast listeners. I'm just making absolutely sure you have already gotten your free, instantly downloadable copy of my new book, The Little Book of Gym Marketing Secrets. You can find a link to download it in the show notes, or you can go to gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. I worked super hard to make sure this is a less than a 30-minute read and is a comprehensive overview of all the things you need to do to grow your gym, get more leads, more clients, and importantly, change more lives. Again, find the link in the show notes where you can download your free copy at gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. And now back to the podcast.
I think the other one, which is the first thing that comes up when people start trying to lead in this kind of quote new way, in this kind of coaching way, is they move from this place of everything needing to happen now with so much urgency to a place of having requiring a little more patience. Right. So this place of like, has to happen now, quick answers, quick responses. The people value me as a leader because I always have the right answer very quickly, right away, to maybe it's okay that things take a little more time. Maybe it's okay I let people figure it out for themselves. Maybe it's okay if we go through, 3, 4, 5 drafts instead of just 1 or 2, right? Maybe it's okay if people do things not my way for a little while and it takes a little longer, right? There's a slowing down that I think this approach also requires. So anyway, as I say all of that, what's running through your head?
Well, I'm just going to do a quick recap. So it's moving from expert to Sherpa or guide. It's moving from judgment to curiosity, and it's moving from urgency to patience.
Yeah. Good summary. Yeah, that's exactly it. Right. And listen, and I want to keep prefacing that, as I've said on this podcast many times, there's no one way to lead. Right. I think part of what we're illustrating here is that leading more like a coach is a kind of way of leading that we all have access to. And it does require us thinking and acting differently when we're in that leadership position. And I think those, thinking, how can I be more of a guide who leads with curiosity and has some patience when people need time to learn and grow and find their own path? It's a different energy than someone who has all the right answers, is an expert, is mad when people get it wrong, and needs everything to happen right now, or else they'll be pissed about it, right? Like, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but the distinction's pretty clear.
Yeah. It sounds more peaceful. It sounds happy. It sounds like a thing I would be able to do for longer if I'm putting myself in the person being led's shoes.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like you have to walk on eggshells around your superior. It barely even feels like they're the superior. I mean, I can speak for myself. I am aware that you are officially my boss, but it never really feels like I feel like we're truly collaborators on a shared purpose journey, even though I know you get final say. But there's been so many things where you're like, where sometimes I'm just like, Michael, can you just fucking tell me what to do? And you won't.
Yeah.
And then in the moment, I'm like, God damn it, I'm trying to figure this out. And when you don't, now it's like, oh, now I'm better at that. Now I can handle that thing. Now I
Yeah.
Like, not only is it better for BFU as a company because I can run with a longer leash or however you want to think about it, but I also feel way happier in my role. And I
Yeah.
would hazard a guess based on the BFU conversations I've had with members, particularly when it comes to anything challenging with a client or with a team member. 95% of the time, the action steps end up being just get curious with that person. Now, I don't want to boil down everything we do into just get curious and all your problems will be solved. But I've got this client and they did this thing that I'm perceiving to be very challenging. What do I do about it? Well, you've asked them about it? Where do you think they were coming from?
Yeah.
Like that, if you truly put on that curiosity hat, the conversations never go as badly as you think they're going to. Maybe 1% of the time someone storms out of the gym, but like that was going to happen no matter how good a job you tried.
Yeah. Well, I love all that. I think the first thing you said really resonates with me a lot. The idea that when you can lead from this place of, putting on your coaching hat, lead with more curiosity, it is less stressful, right? At least that's been my personal experience, right? It won't be that way for everyone at first because, new ways of doing things could actually bring some more anxiety when you're first learning. But for me, when I felt like I had to be the leader who had all the answers, who could solve everyone's problems for them immediately and quickly and well, and it was my job to always be catching people doing things wrong and giving them feedback, that felt like a lot of stress. That felt like
Even
a
as the
lot
leader,
to
that
carry.
felt like stress.
100%. It felt like my job is hard. This is heavy. And when I started to embrace more of a kind of a coaching mindset by asking great questions, being an active listener, just really leaning into that curiosity, and empowering others to think for themselves, I felt more chill. I felt like, oh, I don't have to be the one who has all the answers. Me having really good questions is enough, right? Me actually letting them try things and making room for failure, that's enough. Being honest when I do have strong opinions, right, and want something to go, and I have no shortage of strong opinions on certain topics, right? But when I don't, and there's really truly room for things to be done multiple ways, I want to lead with that. I want to lead with I actually don't have a ton of opinions here. I've tried lots of things. What do you want to try next? Right? It's like such a more chill place to come from. And that doesn't happen by accident, right? I think for many of you listening, all the things Ben and I are saying might sound like lovely. I think that sounds lovely, but it's hard to do. Like it's actually hard to train yourself to think in this way. And so maybe let's get a little tactical for a second. What are some of the brass tacks skills when we think of like having more coaching conversations and leading more like a coach? What are the actual skills you've developed, Ben?
Well, the first one is leading with curiosity. I'm not sure if this is the actual coaching definition because you have more expertise than me with this, but it actually is the skill of being genuinely curious rather than jumping to an assumption. And I want to be clear. I still jump to a lot of assumptions in my head.
Yep.
But I don't fucking say them. I say them in my head and then I'm like,
yep.
What else could be true about that? Or my go-to line when I'm like is sometimes tell me more about that because I'm like, I don't have all the information and I'm trying to gather a little bit. I'm still working on these skills as is apparent. Reflecting, validating, and intuitive listening are also skills. You taught me from coaching conversations. One of the biggest takeaways is you have monologue listening, which is, oh my God, you went to Cuba? I went to Cuba. Where'd you go in Cuba? I stayed here. Did you have the coffee in Cuba? I love the coffee. It's two conversations happening in parallel.
Right.
Then you have reflective listening. It sounds like this. Then there's intuitive listening, which is like, wow, I'm so glad you're able to reconnect with that person because I know how important family is to you. And I know it's been a while since you had that connection. I'm obviously making up completely random examples today. But
but the idea here is like there's different ways to listen. Yeah.
So developing those listening skills and knowing when to choose which, because sometimes you do intuitive and get it wrong and you got to backpedal a little bit. But the combination of like curiosity with some reflecting, with some validating, all wrapped up in listening and like, I don't want to say just caring because that's too broad, but really like believing the person has the ability to figure it out. You just need to lead the horse to water kind of thing. Like that gets people better results if no other reason they're bought in.
Yeah. Well, let me recap what I think you said here, right? Well, you mentioned a few big picture topics, right? Whether you switch to mindset of leading with real curiosity. And the other big mindset is believing that people actually have answers, right? Like believing that inherently people have ideas and answers inside of them, that our job is just kind of like let it out, right? Help it find its way out. So there's, I think, two really big mindset shifts. And then I think the skills you talked about are asking really good questions, often open-ended questions, acknowledging and validating, which is right, repeating back what people said, which is you and I have done on this podcast today and many other times, as a way of
Literally
recapping
doing
and
it
making
right
sure the
now.
person feels heard, right? And we talked a little bit about validating people's experience, right? Which is like not making people feel crazy for feeling that way, which I think you illustrated in some of your examples. Being really intentional about how you listen, right? There's different ways to listen. So learning more about that and being intentional about it. So yeah, I think all of those are really good skills. I think the other skills that you did mention, but I'll add on to this list is the skill of helping people, excuse me, the skill of helping people define their goals and their next steps and holding them accountable. Right? A core part of what coaches do, both training coaches on the floor and life coaches, business coaches, all kinds of coaches, is we help people make their thinking more clear so they can make their action more clear. Right? Muddy thinking often leads to muddy action or inaction. And in the process of our conversation, by asking really good questions and doing really good listening, we often help them clarify their thinking, which hopefully leads to more clear next steps for them. Then we hopefully hold them accountable to taking those next steps. And geez, if that doesn't sound like management, right? That's exactly what managers and leaders do. Right. And so the fact that, this really overlaps with what we try to do every day with our clients and our teams is we help them clarify what's the next step. What are the things you're working on? What are your priorities this week? When do you have time this week to get it done? How hard is that task going to be for you? How likely are you to get it done on that deadline? What other things might you need to get it done, right? What's going to get in the way, right? These are all just questions to help people clarify. What is their next step? What are their actions? How are they going to make sure it really gets done? Then we hold them accountable through like meetings and check-ins and right. So I think this process of coaching often finalizes, if it's a good coaching conversation, it often finalizes in some clear next steps, some actual things people are going to do next. That just aligns so well with the kind of managers and leaders we all want to be.
Yeah. And to kind of hammer that point home even further, often when we are leading someone and we're trying to get them clarity and get next steps, instead of it feeling like this high friction conversation or relationship, we're getting to the same end result. We're not giving up on the outcomes here and saying anyone can do whatever they want. Everyone has all the answers and there's no expertise. Expertise isn't valid.
No.
What we're saying is there's many paths to Rome. And if nothing else, this gives a much easier way to get to the same destination.
Yeah, 100%. People still have roles and responsibilities, and they are, their job is tied to them performing well in their role. And so you can use these coaching skills and still have accountability. In fact, you might have better accountability because people will be collaborators in determining what their next steps or their paths might be, right? They'll have more buy-in because they will have helped get you to the place where their action steps are clear, right? They will have they weren't just handed a task. They were part of the conversation that led to that task, right? So you're going to have more buy-in and better completion rates than if you were to just dictate to everyone what to do all the time. And so, yeah, I mean, this is not leading with more coaching skills is not a free for all. Right. It's not everyone has all the answers all the time. There's no such thing as truth or right or wrong, right? Like that's not where we're heading here. We're just saying that leading with a little more curiosity instead of judgment, super helpful. Leading as more of a guide than an expert, super helpful. Having a little bit of patience for people to do their own learning instead of urgently telling people what to do and how, useful, right? These are all tools that help us actually create what I like to refer to like a more human workplace, a place where people can bring their whole selves and feel like they can thrive. And we all want to work at a place like that.
Absolutely, we do.
Yeah. For people who want to get started in incorporating some of the things we talked about here today, Ben, where do they start? Because I know, you've been learning coaching skills with me and others for many years, like literal years now. And so thinking back to beginner Ben, just trying to learn some of these things for the first time, where do you start?
Oh my God. I had a feeling this question was coming. It's such a big bucket. I want to make something reasonably tactical.
Take your time.
I think I've got 2 steps, and if you think of better ones, please let me know.
Great.
I think my experience has been that starting with self-awareness has been super valuable.
Great.
And that can be in the form of doing 360 feedback with your team. It could even be in the form of doing like 360 feedback with the people who are closest to in your life. I did an exercise from Dan Sullivan where you send an email out with prompting questions. It's not just like, what do you think of me? Prompting questions like 10 or 12 friends. And I got some very valuable insight. But to see like, how do I show up in the eyes of other people is very valuable, because if you come across as like me, a bit robotic, and you can have a tendency to steamroll people, like maybe that's something I want to insulate against a little bit, just because that's my norm that I didn't know I had. So step one is self-awareness. 360 feedback could be a valuable tool for that. Step two is, honestly, I still say to myself a lot, curiosity is the opposite of judgment. So when I catch myself judging, which is probably 3 times as frequent as I catch myself doing it, that is my trigger, and my habit is when I catch myself judging, I swap to curiosity, because I'm like, right, I cannot be curious if I'm judging. So those are 2 baby steps on the long, never-ending road to
I love that.
leadership.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I love that you started with self-awareness, like get to know how other people see you and experience you. That's huge, right? I think that's really critical, right? And then catching yourself in those moments when you find yourself judging. I'll add another one to that. When you find yourself feeling really right, when you're convinced that you have like the one and only answer, right? That's another moment to pause and say, how do I get curious here? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we keep adding to that list, but whenever you find yourself judging or just absolutely right or digging your heels in, to pause and say, okay, well, if I was leading with more curiosity, what would I ask instead? What would I do instead? Right. You don't have to do it, right? We're not asking you to commit to it if you don't want to. At the very least, finding that pause in those moments and just having that conversation with yourself. Okay, what I want to do right now is tell them exactly how they fucked up and what to do differently. If I was going to lead with more curiosity, what might I do instead? Right. And just have that conversation with yourself. Whether you act on it or not is up to you. I encourage you to try. But even if you just think through, okay, well, maybe I can ask them more about what happened. Maybe I could talk to a few more people who were also there and saw what happened. Or maybe I can brainstorm with them things we could do together, right? Like anything that gets you out of that place of judging and or being right is useful for you to play around with. Yeah. So I think you crushed it, Ben. I think that's awesome. All right. Well, let's leave it there. We can talk about this topic for a long time. I know we're both very passionate about it, and hopefully this was useful to all of you out there. So if you want to leave from a place of more curiosity and use some more coaching skills, by all means, try some things we talked about in this podcast. It can only help in expanding your leadership repertoire. And if you want some help, from us in terms of making your business more organized and getting unstuck and figuring out what to work on next in your business, we got that ultimate Gym Owner report card I mentioned at the top of the episode. So in the show notes, go click the ultimate Gym Owner report card, get that free download, and it only takes 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes, and it'll help you get really clear on what to work on next in your business. So go grab it. Thanks, Ben. I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.